Hey there, it's Ryan Reynolds, and you are listening to Fearless in Devotion, the absolute worst podcast in all of football history. Go get them, guys.
Here they come, a mighty champions.
Welcome to a bonus Fearless in Devotion. We've got a special guest. So how do we describe Elis James? Comedian, actor, podcaster, documentary maker, book judge, professional Welshman?
Don't say professional Welshman, for God's sake. A friend of mine accuses me of being that, and it gets me right there, cuts me to the quick.
All right, so I've already annoyed him. This is a one thing we will say for certain: he's a man who knows more about Welsh football culture than most. So who better to ask him where Wrexham currently sit in all of it? So welcome to the pod, Elis James. Thank you very much for coming on.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So right, I want to talk about Welcome to Wrexham, which is a documentary which seems to have really struck a chord with people, especially in North America. Do you think there's anything better repping Wales around at the moment than that doc?
Not on a global level. It's absolutely huge, Welcome to Wrexham. And the interesting thing with Welcome to Wrexham is people who are football fans will say to me, or my partner or my kids who don't like football and have got no interest in sport, they love it. And the thing I like as a Welsh person who's used to Welsh people often being poorly represented in other countries by those countries is the lack of cliche and stereotypes. So the thing I really love the most is the way they approach the Welsh language. The Welsh language is never a punchline. And even now, in 2025, you get comedians from other countries, even non-Welsh speaking Welsh comics, doing stuff about, there's not enough vowels and it's just all consonants and you need to spit every time you say place name and all that kind of stuff. Jokes have been made for 100 years and they haven't done any of that stuff. And they've introduced Wales and Welshness. And also, I mean, I'm from West Wales, but most of the Welsh cliches are South Walian. And obviously Wrexham is in northeast Wales, and so that's an aspect of Welshness I think that sort of a lot of Americans might not have been made aware of, because, you know, Gavin and Stacey obviously is Barry, and Joanna Page is from Swansea, and it's a sort of Welshness that I think people are used to, but I think that little patch near Wrexham has been quite underrepresented, apart from obviously by his footballers. Because when you look at the amazing footballers who've come from that area in particular, it's, you know, what a record for producing world-class talent, considering it's such a small place. So no, it's a really good programme, I think. And a friend of mine who's from Swansea, actually a big Swansea fan, his kids are in school in London, and he was at a school event, a school assembly or something, and there was a guy in front of him wearing a Wrexham cap. And he thought, another Welsh bloke, this is good. I'll go and introduce myself. We can talk about, Welsh football. The guy was from like Cincinnati or something. He's just a Wrexham fan. And we've, obviously now there are people who aren't from North Wales going to watch Wrexham. And we had a little taste of this with the Swans, because when we were managed by Michael Laudrup, you'd be in the away end at Goodison Park and there would just be loads of Danish people. And when we had Key playing for us, we had loads of Koreans. I remember being at Arsenal and there must have been about 30 or 40 Korean people. And you thought, wow, they're going to be Swansea fans for life. And then as soon as that person leaves, you never see them again.
Yeah.
And it's back to people who were born in Morriston. But, it's I know a lot of Wrexham fans. And so it's, I'm getting, I'm quite close to the excitement, if you know what I mean. So, yeah, I think it's great.
I mean, we're sort of wondering why it's struck such a chord in North America. Obviously, you've got the star element that helps, and I think that those two guys are great at marketing. Rob especially has done quite a bit with the Welsh language. I know he's learning. But one thing that sort of struck me is maybe it's the normalness. Maybe it's the fact that American sports stars are they're on ivory towers. But these sports stars seem very accessible. You wouldn't see Tom Grady doing his drywall, which Rob Layton did in the first episode of the first season.
I think it's a class thing because it's a working class area. And I think people can relate to that. And also, American sport across the board doesn't have promotion and relegation. And that Jeopardy is, they haven't got anything like it. I'm not knocking American sport, because obviously there's enormous jeopardy once you get to a super, when you're trying to get into the Super Bowl or whatever, or win the World Series. But the idea that, look at Leeds United, the great Leeds United I remember going up to Ellen Road and playing them in League One. And then obviously you look at Bournemouth or Brighton or Swansea and possibly Wrexham could end up in the Premier League playing Liverpool and Man City and Man United. And it's just incredible. And the thing I didn't fully appreciate, actually, until I started doing a football podcast, was that when the Swans got relegated from the Premier League, loads of people lost their jobs. Like, it has it's not just, oh, it's a shame because I used to really like going to watch us play Aston Villa and Arsenal and all these big clubs. People lose their jobs. It really affects livelihoods across the city and across the area. So in terms of jeopardy and peril in sport, there's nothing like it. And like, look at Sampdoria. I remember them winning the Serie A and being one of the best teams in Europe, and they're in Serie C now. They're in the Italian version of League One.
They were Football Italia when they started, wasn't it?
Absolutely. That kit with ERG, whatever ERG was. And, and so I think it's introduced that to an American audience, because that is how, from what I remember, that is how Humph got Rob McElhenney on board. He showed him the Sunderland one, Sunderland Till I Die, because Rob thought that, football was just nil-nils, and he's got a sort of point to an extent, but it's the idea that you can lose your status as a Premier League team or a Championship team, and the impact that has on the area. I think that they really, really latched onto that.
I think another thing, maybe, I've always sort of thought that it's quite easy to score in American sports. I mean,
yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
But
basketball, it is mad. You can't celebrate the 100th point like you celebrate the first one.
But I mean, it's fucking hard to score a goal, isn't it? So when you do, the sort of outburst of emotion is more pure than you probably get in other sports. And I think they bought into that a little bit. You can tell them really sort of getting into it.
There's a rarity value to football. And I really love cricket. I think cricket's an amazing sport. But there is a rarity value to goals that runs don't have, for instance. And also, American sport doesn't have limbs in the same way. And once you've introduced limbs to the American audience, then you're onto a winner, I think.
Elis, last one from me before I hand over to Liam. So you sort of mentioned him, and we've gone on about the normalness and the sort of working classness of Welcome to Wrexham, but there, stuck in the middle, is who is
6 or 7 of him, yeah.
Yeah, it was none of these things. I mean, when did you first meet Humphrey, and is he actually any good at football?
I met Humphrey, I think, in about 2009 on the comedy circuit, and we became friends. He's a really genuinely lovely bloke. I went to his wedding, actually. I really love the man. And he is a very good player. I think he's improved, because I played in the Taskmaster charity game a few weeks ago, and I was playing for Chicken City, and he had a great game for Egg United. And I actually think the match reports didn't make enough of how good a game Humph had. And when we used to play in the Comedians game in London, and I play on the wing, so my job was to, beat a 50-year-old satirist on the right-hand side and sort of cross the ball in. But because he's 6 or 7, there's no such thing as a bad cross, because he just gets on the end of everything. Because he's so tall.
They always said that Peter Crouch wasn't good in the air because he didn't need to be.
Yeah, Andy Carroll was good in the air because he was 6'5". But no, he's a really good bloke, and he's really dedicated to the club as well. And it's just, in 2009 when I met him, it was around the time of our sort of first Edinburgh shows. So you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, where will we be in 10 years' time? Will we still be doing it even? Oh God, will I have had my big break? Will I have done Mock the Week and all this kind of stuff? if someone had said to me, "Oh yeah, he'll be executive director of Wrexham Football Club," I thought you were high. They've been like, but yeah, no, he's a really top bloke. You're lucky to have him.
Ellis, we're heading into pretty uncharted waters for Wrexham fans. I was thinking about this the other day, and I think probably the youngest people who can remember Wrexham in the second tier, probably in their 50s, I would hazard. Somewhere
I worked in a pub in the early 2000s in Cardiff, and my boss was a Wrexham fan, and that's why he was from Cardiff, and that's why he started supporting Wrexham, because they were in the second tier in the sort of late 70s when he was a kid. So he would be in his mid 50s now. Yeah.
Yeah, you're a bit more versed in the championship than us. What's it like, and how on earth are we going to get out of there, I think is the question.
It's hard, and I know that people would have said it's a big step up when he went from National League to Football League.
Yeah.
And obviously he passed that test with flying colours, and I know that everyone would have said, well, League One's different prospect to League Two, and obviously you passed that with flying colours. I think from a fan experience, what's so different is that you're playing clubs, a lot of clubs you're used to seeing in the Premier League.
Yeah.
So you're turning up at grounds that you will remember from Match of the Day. And they're all big clubs really in the Championship. And so you've always got good away ends. And it just feels, the games themselves feel like a bit more of an event. Because certainly when we were in League Two and League One, playing some teams on a Tuesday night, they might bring 50 or 60, whereas that never really happens in the Championship. Also, much far less likely. And I mean, from what I know, the Championship is financial suicide for everyone because they're big contracts, and obviously you're earning less, but you've got less to worry about, I suppose, where that's concerned. Getting out of the Championship is really tricky as well because we've been down there since 2018. And this is up to Ryan and Rob, isn't it? Because for the series, if you went back to back to back to back, that is amazing television. But if you're a proper football person who's worked in the game for years and years, you're going to say, consolidate.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's good telly, though, is it?
Rob McElhenney hates that word, apparently.
Does he?
Yes.
Did you watch the episode last night where they consolidated for a bit? I'm not sure that's how Hollywood superstars think, is it? I'll just do a couple of boring films to consolidate my career.
I mean, I think on a serious note, there's probably some of us Wrexham fans just looking at it and thinking, I guess, what do you need to do to survive in the Championship? Because for many of us, that's our initial hope.
When Brian Flynn managed us, when he managed Swansea in the early 2000s, and kept us up on the last day of the season from being relegated from the Football League to the National League, I remember reading, we bought Lee Trundle that summer, I think. And I remember reading an article with him in the Western Mail where he said, I see in Swans being a Championship team in 5 years or something. Well, that's my aim. And I thought he was crazy. Because that had always been for me, because we'd almost done it in the early 90s. That had always been, I thought, where we sort of sat in the natural scheme of things, a sort of Championship team. But when it hadn't happened in my lifetime, or I'd been very, I'd be like a baby. So it was always sort of the promised land. I thought the Premier League was completely out the question. So it's a great division. It's a brilliant division. It's incredibly competitive. And you put a run of games together in March and you can be near the playoffs. You start losing games in March and suddenly you're looking over your shoulder at relegation. And it is just a big step up from League One in terms of the fan experience. Because I remember when we were in League One, Forest came down around that time and Leeds United came down. And you would go to those games and it just felt like a big deal. It just felt like an event, which you don't get at some clubs. But all those Championship matches do. And the first year, it's a bit like the first year in the Premier League. Everyone's desperate for tickets. It's really, really good fun. So if you can string a few results together, you'll have a really good time in the Championship. And you can leave the finances to multi-millionaires who own gin companies.
It's nice not having to worry about that anymore.
Yeah.
One thing people have been sort of wondering, which hasn't happened for quite a while, is when will Wrexham get their next Wales international? Because there's quite a few of us that are quite keen to see that, because it's been quite a while. Like, I can't remember who the last was, come to think of it.
Well, you've had a few women's games, and didn't you play Trinidad at the racecourse? I think.
Yeah.
So there've been a few in one or two friendlies in the last sort of 5 or 6 years. I don't think that I doubt we'll start playing in qualifying games there, competitive games, because the players seem so happy at the Cardiff City Stadium. In the way that the players in the 80s were so happy at the racecourse. So that game, when we drew with Scotland at Ninian Park and didn't qualify for Mexico 86, Mike England begged the FAW, said, please let us play that game at the racecourse, because the players regarded it as lucky and he regarded it as lucky. And I don't think that he'd ever lost a game at the racecourse. So, but the Ninian Park was marginally bigger, so the FAW were thinking of the balance sheet. They were like, yeah, we'd make more money if we play there, and there's a demand for tickets. He was like, but think of the money you'll make if we get to the 1986 World Cup. So, and the racecourse is the home of Welsh football, Welsh international football. So, yeah, personally, I would love friendlies to be played there regularly, because also I know a lot of North Walians who are, through Wales Away and stuff. It is hard to get to Cardiff, especially on a weeknight for an international game. And so they deserve matches that are slightly more achievable, I think, from North Wales.
Yeah.
Elis, I'm just looking at time. So what I want to do is just do a couple of quick fire questions.
Yeah.
But before that, can we just talk about the William Hill Sportsbook of the Year? Any
yes,
sort
absolutely.
Of themes? You say you're a judge this year again. Any
I am
themes
a judge.
you're seeing, or any?
Not yet.
Really
Not yet. But the exciting thing with it is that I would be reading a lot of these books anyway, because I do a podcast called The Social Distance Sports Bar, where you got to choose a book every 3 weeks. And I'm a sort of sports book obsessive, so the idea of getting sent all the latest good ones is a dream. They come in this massive box, and then they're like, right, see you in November. So it's great. I didn't judge it last year. I was unable to because I was on tour, but I judged it 2 years ago, and it was a really amazing experience. Also, what they do is they sit you in a restaurant, and you've got to turn up with your notes, and you just argue the toss over what you think the best sports book of the last 12 months has been. So it's a really interesting panel with people from all sorts of different backgrounds. So it's a really exciting thing to do, and I'm very honoured to be asked.
Good. Let's do a couple of quick fire. Right. First one. Lee Trundle owes more to Wrexham than he does to Swansea. Discuss.
Well, they made him a professional footballer, didn't they, at Wrexham? But having cycled from Swansea to Newport for the British Heart Foundation with Lee, cycling through Swansea with Lee Trundle, it is like cycling around Hollywood with Taylor Swift. That guy is absolutely loved. So I'm gonna and we put him on Soccer AM. So I'm gonna say the Swans over Wrexham.
You know what? Begrudgingly, you're probably right. What's his singing voice like?
His singing voice is great, and he really gets stuck in as well. That's the thing. He was like, yeah, I'll do that. He's an absolutely fantastic bloke, Lee Trundle. He's great company because he's just a yes man. He just says yes to stuff, and it's great to be around someone like
that. Right. I'm just want to ask you about the Cop. We're getting to the end, but I just want to ask you about the Cop and why was the old Wrexham Cop so great? Because I can remember watching the BBC show you did where you went there and what do you think the new Cop's going to be like?
Well, there was something special about terraced ends. That's the thing. And obviously Wrexham are lucky they had theirs for longer than most. We had the North Bank at the Swans, but I haven't stood at Swansea. Obviously, we now got sort of safe standing, but I haven't stood on an old-fashioned terrace for a very long time. And when I stood on the Cop, we were making a documentary. It just felt really evocative. It was like going back in time. You could just feel it. So through 5 Live, I'm friends with Adrian Childs, right? And Adrian Childs is very good mates with Bryn Law. So Adrian was on the Cop when Wrexham beat Arsenal in 1992. And he said he's basically the only bloke who was watching Mickey's sort of free kick because people just had their heads in their hands because it was late on in the game, and it's those ends were a really special thing in creating sort of football culture. And so, I loved standing on the dock. I never got to stand on there when it was full. But the new one is, I've not seen the plans or the designs, but whoever's in charge has got to basically create an iconic end, because that is where Wrexham fans always, that's where the most vocal supporters stood. So fingers crossed they get it right. But they tend to now. I mean, the new Spurs Stadium's absolutely incredible. So yeah, I'm sure it'll be brilliant.
Right. Last thing from us, we do like a quick fire round where we just basically first name that comes into your head on these 5 questions, and maybe probably about Welsh football or people you see. So who's the most skillful?
What Welsh footballer ever?
Or football that maybe played for Swansea. Just around that sort of.
Oh, Welsh footballer ever, Gareth Bale for the Swans, Lee Trundle.
Okay, yeah. Worst dressed, that could be Lee Trundle as well.
Worst dressed. What a question that is.
That one froze people quite a lot, actually.
Yeah, you know what? Remember remember when Trundle absolutely savaged Tommy Cowse in the live night we had once for what he was wearing. I think absolutely destroyed him.
I can't say Tommy Cowse is the worst dressed person in Welsh football.
Can he?
No. I mean, it's very funny.
Lee Trundle said it.
Lee Trundle said that Tommy Cowse is the worst dressed person in Welsh football. All right, I'll check that in.
Next one is, who's the biggest moaner?
Oh. Now then. In Welsh football?
Yeah. Or someone in and around the Swans or Cardiff or...
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I've got some friends who are just convinced that we're going to lose every game. I mean, in terms of... Oh, God, that's a tough question, actually. I'm trying to think of a manager who was... Luke Williams used to... By the end of his time at Swansea, Luke Williams used to moan quite a lot.
Yeah. And we know of Luke Williams. He was part of that county side, and
Oh, of course, yeah.
So, who's the most underrated? Who didn't really get the plaudits that they deserved from the sort of Welsh football fandom?
Oh, that's a great question. I think by football fans in general, Ben Davies is hugely underrated. He has never put a foot wrong for Wales. I mean, I would put him in an all-time 11. I think he's an absolutely sensational defender because you just trust him. So I would say Ben Davies, actually, because I think that we'll really miss him when he's gone, and I would put him in our greatest ever team.
Last one from us. Which is the person you'd least like to fight?
Oh my God. Well, he used to play for Swansea. I met Adebayo in Fenwa in Fantasy Football League, and he would end me. He's a lovely, lovely man, but I hugged him at the end of the show, and I couldn't get my arms around his back. I felt about 10 years old.
So they're not just glamour muscles. That's pure.
No, he is a big, strong guy. So yeah, I would say Bayo.
Elis James, thank you very much.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me, lads.
Here they come, a mighty champions. Raise your voices to